celebrate life, to celebrate the lives you have given us. Be with us today as we discuss how we can best use our gifts and talents where we are planted in order to glorify you. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, so my name is Rachel Geraci, and I am the Mission and Ministry Director here at Lutherans for Life. I have been given 29 years of wonderful life with two beautiful parents, my mother Claire and my father Carl, who are here. Last year, about just a year ago, I was blessed with joining my life with my husband Coleman, who is literally the best guy I've ever met. And 12 weeks ago, I was gifted once again with a daughter, my son Ruth, who is on grandma's lap right now. Today, we are here to talk about rural and small town missions and how we as Lutherans can use our gifts and talents to glorify God in these small areas. I work with life teams and life chapters throughout the country, and what we find is a lot of times when people are planted by God in those areas, those rural areas, small towns, anywhere that potentially have less than 20,000 people, a lot of times it can be very discouraging for many reasons. Whether that be the fact that you just don't have enough people do stuff. I want to do this project, but where are the volunteers? Or potentially there's less resources. There's this girl who's thinking about having an abortion, but we don't have a crisis pregnancy center anywhere nearby. How am I supposed to help her? Or, just like in older demographics, you go to these smaller areas, a lot of times the demographics tend to be on the older side. Once again, you feel as though you don't have enough volunteers because people don't have the same energy levels that they had when they were younger. So I asked a wonderful group of people who are from these areas to talk to us about their experiences. I'm going to go ahead and introduce everyone on the panel, and then I'm going to turn it on over to Pastor Todd Kollbaum, who is the LCMS Mission, Rural and Small Town Mission Leader here at Synod, to talk about church work specifically in these small town areas, and then we'll open it up to the panelists for certain questions. So, let's see, your left to right. Pastor Eric Pensky, he is a pastor in Bear Creek, Wisconsin, serving both Trinity and Grace Lutheran churches. He has a wonderful wife, Marie, who's right out there, and 4 daughters, the youngest being Marta, who they were privileged to adopt after they found out the birth mother was considering having an abortion. From Kansas, we have 2 individuals on the end over there. Pastor Michael Schmidt, want to wave? Yep, Pastor Michael Schmidt, and then also Mr. Martin Ulrich. They're both part of the Natoma Lutherans for Life chapter. Pastor Schmidt is the pastor at both Peace Lutheran and First Lutheran in Natoma and Plainfield, Kansas. He's a circuit visitor, and he's written for Higher Things in Life Date. He and his wife Lindsay have a son named Theodore. Mr. Martin Ulrich is the president of the Natoma Lutherans for Life chapter. He is a member at Pastor Schmidt's church. He is a farmer and a rancher, and he and his wife have 3 children. Mr. Kevin Church in the middle here. He is the president of the Northern Ozarks Life chapter in Lincoln, Missouri. He is from upstate New York originally, an Army veteran, and has been married to his wife Michelle for 12 years. Or sorry, I read that one, 32 years, much longer than that. I was like 12 years, that's not right.
I didn't wonder about that. I know you're longer than that. We've been together longer than that, I know.
32 years, it's been a long time, it's great. And yeah, finally, Pastor Todd Kollbaum in the white right here, director of LCMS Rural and Small Town Mission. Before that, he was the pastor at Trinity Lutheran Church in Cole Camp, Missouri. He has been married to his wife Angela for 28 years. They're blessed with 5 children and are expecting their first grandchild in December. Woo, exciting. So my parents are first-time grandparents too, so this is an exciting time for you. So.
That's cool.
So Pastor Kollbaum, you don't mind coming up and speaking to us for a few minutes about just church work in general in these areas, what you have learned from your experience in the church, but then also as the director of the Small Town Mission.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you said your last name.
Yeah.
I've been getting emails from Deaconess Rachel for quite some time, and they started out one way and ended up another, and I was trying to guess who would have thought that Fikenja would be the easier of the 2 last names. But how great, yeah, what a blessing, and thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. It's always a blessing when we have an opportunity as rural and small town mission and ministry practitioners, if you will, can get together and talk about these things, and especially here at the Life conference because it is such an important aspect that permeates so much of the life of the rural and small town congregation. So really, our office, the LCMS National Mission, comes out of St. Louis, but LCMS Rural and Small Town Mission really can't be here. That doesn't make any sense. So you made me come to the city where people act like they've never driven in rain before, and everybody's in a big old hurry, and so, but I'm okay. I'm all right with that. But I did drive a pickup, so you just have to do certain things, right? And when I got my pickup, I did have one lady really, she was ecstatic that I got this pickup. I'd been driving a car before that, and she was ecstatic that I got a pickup, and I was kind of shocked. I said, "Why are you so happy that I got a pickup?" And she said, "I think the director of LCMS Rural and Small Town Mission needs to drive a pickup." So I do. Our office is out in Concordia, Missouri. I know some of you know where Concordia, Missouri is, home of St. Paul Lutheran High School, a boarding high school there, which is really a unique place to do ministry because it is there's such an international flavor. We have so many international students. But that is where our office is. My house is just a couple blocks from there. My house is in town, but I have this year, bean field in my backyard, and maybe sometime by Christmas it will be able to be harvested. I was telling a couple of these guys, I did see some kind of interesting memes on Facebook lately. A corn head on the front of a pontoon boat, and a combine, a John Deere combine with a bean head on it that was going through about 6 feet of snow. So that's the way things are. But as you put in your introduction for this time at the conference, 97% of the United States is rural and small town. I grew up in that place. I drove Iowa. It's a town of about 3,000 in northwest Iowa. I grew up a farmer. We farmed, we raised hogs, imagine that, in Iowa. We had cattle, corn, beans. I've walked beans, I've detasseled corn. I've done everything, but the Lord has brought me to here, to this day, by His most merciful grace, to be a part of that ministry in a much broader sense. So in the LCMS, over half of our congregations in the United States are rural and small town. So over half of the congregations. Now what I think people often are a little bit even more surprised about is, of those congregations, they also make up half of the population or membership of the LCMS. So it really is representative of a huge group in our church body that are rural and small town. And so we have an opportunity to affect and generate a lot of mission and ministry activity for the folks that are around us. And when you think about that, there are some 65 million people in the United States, and about 20% live in rural and small town, but that's still millions of people when you think about it. And we might think our impact isn't all that great, but when you think about the sheer magnitude of half of the LCMS has an opportunity in the LCMS alone to reach out to folks, and conservatively, you take a conservative estimate of a third of the people of that 20 million folks in rural and small town places. If you conservatively say a third of them, right, aren't church, which we know it's far greater than that, you're still talking about millions and millions of people. Millions and millions of people with whom we might have interaction with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And what an opportunity that is for us. Certainly there are some difficulties. As you mentioned, we have declining populations in many places. Although statistics are showing us back migration, and where we do have declines in population, they are typically across the board only about 1%, as if I studied this stuff day in and day out. But they are typically only on average about 1%. And so, yes, there are some declines, but there are some places where we have people moving back. And they aren't connected to the church. They aren't connected to the gospel, perhaps formerly connected, but we have an opportunity there as well. To be sure, economies are difficult. Rural and small town places haven't rebounded quite as quickly as more urban and suburban areas. And so the economic hardships earlier in the 2000s are still affecting, by and large, the rural and small town areas to a greater degree than more metropolitan areas. But we don't let that bother us. Access to health care is certainly an issue. Drug abuse is the opioid abuse and methamphetamine abuse in rural and small town areas is epidemic. It far outshines the numbers that we see even out of more metropolitan areas, and it's very frightening. The suicide rate among farmers is higher than veterans in the United States. I just read that statistic the other day. There's a changing ethos in the rural small town areas. We've gone from that, or we're losing that kind of gritty, determined, intestinal fortitude kind of ethos, and we're trading that for one that represents a little more worldly ethos, and that's scary as well. There's certainly a loss of church presence. So many churches are closing or drastically reducing the impact that they've been able to have in a community. And certainly the folks that are there or coming in have by and large moved so far, where it used to be everybody in the community was churched and all of their social activities revolved around the church. It just doesn't happen anymore. It's just not the way things are. And certainly views on life issues, abortion, euthanasia have changed drastically as well. Where that we were maybe a bastion of hope, we're starting to reflect the worldly views on those issues as well, and it's truly a sad state. Yet there is so much to be joyful about in rural and small town church work. So much to be joyful about. Folks are there because there is trust and there is safety. So it's an opportunity for the church to reach out and provide that trust and safety. Where there's an opportunity to talk about issues, life issues, we have an opportunity to bring to bear a word that no one else can bring. And an opportunity to impact them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. There's caring neighbors. It's a good place to raise families. There still tends to be cohesiveness and friendliness in rural and small town congregations, as well as school systems and in communities themselves. And so we want to help foster that as well. The fellowship, the lower cost of living, the lower crime rates, strong work ethic, agrarian economies, the slower pace, which I particularly appreciate. And I'm appreciating that more and more the older I get. While we are starting to reflect more of a worldly ethos, we still are by and large fairly anti-faddish and resist the ways of the world, at least to a certain degree. So it gives us opportunity to reach out to folks before things are so far gone. And most importantly, the church is still there. Christ is still there. We are still there to bring this message of hope to a dying world. And that's what I go around the United States in the LCMS and talk to congregations about, because as long as the Lord has us doing work in the place where He's planted us to do it, for this time He is giving us everything we need to do that work. He is equipping us to do that work. He is sending us to do that work, and we are called to do that work so long as we have opportunity. And when that ceases to be, well, then we cease to be. But until then, we need to fight our level best by His most merciful grace, empowered by His Holy Spirit to do the work that He has called us to do. And that's to reach out to our communities and those around us with the beautiful gospel message of life in Christ Jesus. I thank you, Rachel, for the opportunity to be here and part of this great panel, and I hope that we all have opportunity to grace those around us with that beautiful message. Thank you so much.
So now we're going to open it up to our panelists. As I said before, all these people are actively involved in life ministry, whether that is through life teams, life chapters, or their congregation itself is very involved in the life arena. I'll just hand the microphone to you. That doesn't mean you have to talk. It's just, you can be charged out. Maybe just raise your hand if you want to answer, stuff like that. And well, I did have some prepared questions that the panelists were able to look at ahead of time. You guys don't all have to answer every question, but just if you feel like you have an answer that would be nice to hear, go ahead and wave your hand and we'll pass the microphone to you. So, and after we go through the questions, then I'll open it up to all you guys to allow you to pick their brains if there's anything that you are interested in knowing more about. So, what drew you to being a part of the pro-life movement?
I'll start. And I'm going to answer this maybe in a negative, because I have a hard time hearing people say that they love Jesus and follow Jesus, and yet are okay with abortion and euthanasia. I mean, how can you read the scriptures and see Christ, who was conceived as a child, who healed the sick, who did all the things that he did, and say that life doesn't matter? It just baffles my mind. And so to just be in Christ, I think draws us necessarily to love life and everything about it. So again, I just don't understand how people can think otherwise. And so that's my answer for short.
I could just say ditto. Right? Yeah. But I think for me, personally, it was a non-starter. It's just the way it's always been. Growing up, that's just the way I thought. That's what the scripture said, and there was really no other. I think the more as I mature in the faith, and in years, and raising my own 5 children, and now awaiting my first grandchild, and having been a nursing home administrator for 10 years prior to going to the seminary, and seeing the things that I've seen, it's probably more than redoubled my commitment and my steadfastness in that love of the Lord and love for things, all things life, and so that's kind of where I come from.
I have a very simple answer. My wife made me do it. Actually, my wife is here with me today, attending the conference. Yeah, my wife of 12 years. She got involved in Lutherans for Life and had been involved for about a year. So my first contact with Lutherans for Life was through my wife. We have to drive a good 30 to 45 minutes to get to any local Lutheran church. Talk about rural and small town. We're 30 to 45 minutes in either direction from a Lutheran church. So she would drive over on a Sunday afternoon to attend the meeting, and I'd just sit at the house by myself watching TV. So I thought I'd go along with her one Sunday afternoon, and she said, sure, let's go. And I've been in Lutherans for Life ever since. And it sure has opened my eyes to a lot of stuff that I never even realized before. And so now I'm in the process of trying to get out there and letting everybody else know what's actually going on and how much Christ means to us in our lives. Christ is life to us, and we need to share that with others.
I have been kind of wanting to do something more than just mission work. Going to church. So we actually started in 2001, and our pastor was the one that kind of visited with a few of us. And because I've been kind of looking to do something more than just going to church, I found it exciting. So what better way to start something as far as mission work than the love of babies? Christ loved us, why would we at least love these innocent babies? So that's what motivated me. And then it's kind of a neat way to start a mission work to begin with, because you can go up and talk to everybody about that. So it was just intriguing to me, and it's really turned out well since we've done that, since we started.
I would say it's mostly been education. I grew up in a large urban city. I grew up in New York City and was just surrounded by a lot of just not a pro-life atmosphere, not a pro-life environment. So really, it really started with education, just going and finding what were the answers to some of these pro-choice arguments, and then she left the room, but Renee Gibbs came and showed us a video in one of our seminary classes one day, and just having my eyes open to, wow, that's actually the horrors of it. And then really being blessed with the call that I went to a congregation that had a Lutherans for Life group started that sort of didn't necessarily force me, but gave me the opportunity to get up and actually be active and be a part of a pro-life group, instead of just sitting back and saying, yep, we're pro-life, and then not doing anything, but to be plugged into a group that was already active and already doing stuff that gave opportunity to just interact and be a part of it.
Very good. In 1 Corinthians 7, St. Paul writes, "Each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned to them, just as God has called them." How has Christ used you to glorify Him where you have been planted, specifically in those small town areas?
I would just start by saying, just by writing a newsletter, writing sermons, and I have a blog and write on that, and some of that has been very well received, and some of the blog posts have been shared, and the newsletters were distributed more widely. So I would just say, just being able to write and use that as a means to get the message out.
Since we started, we give talks to other churches in the areas of January for Life Sunday. We've probably been to 3 or 4 different churches now. We also try to help encourage people to start life groups. That is slow to do that, but we keep trying to encourage it to help others and say that we'll come to help them start if they want to get something going. We also spent a week at the Stockton Fair, where we have a booth, which has been really successful for people coming up and come to the booth and learning about life.
I really don't have an answer for this question. I'd like to say that Christ hopefully is still using me. We have a small group that's based in Lincoln, Missouri. We have a total of about 14, 15 congregations in our circuit. And we kind of represent the whole circuit. And we haven't done a whole lot in the last few years, but I'm hoping to get started doing more things. So I pray that Christ has great plans for His ministry through me and our small group.
I think when I was still in the parish, I was actually in Polk, Missouri, which is only a few miles from the Lincoln congregation where they started the life team there for the Northern Ozarks. So we really had an opportunity to encourage that. But something, as my roles have changed now in my current position, something that I took from there, and actually I have heard an actual district president say as well, the attitude that when we are in these rural and small town areas, that we can be the pastor to an entire community. So you are that community's pastor, whether they know it or not. And so we have the opportunity to develop relationships and create an atmosphere where we can be approachable. So when people are struggling with these issues, we are the go-to folks. So whether it's through the life team and having that open presence, or in our own pastoral studies, or wherever I happen to be, I encourage that wherever I go. So that's really where we've been with that.
Absolutely. Just to build on what he said, just being there. When I first got my very first call out of the seminary, immediately got plugged into the local pro-life group that was up in the nearest big town, which is 3,000 people. Ours was 270. But to be able to just participate with them in just the normal things that they do, their campaigns, their walk for life. They had a golf outing, which actually went really well in a small town like that. We actually raised tens of thousands of dollars in a town of 3,000 people at a golf outing every year. It was amazing. But being present at those things and just making your face known, my congregation and then the people of the community recognized right away, that this was something that I was pretty passionate about. And so they felt like they could approach you with that, or concerns or anything of the nature. We had the very unique opportunity, as was said in the introduction, to be able to adopt our youngest daughter when we found out. I'm not going to go into the whole long story because it was a miracle how we found out anyway. But we found out that her mother was going to have an abortion, and we were able to step in and adopt her. And that was an opportunity for us really to put our money where our mouth is, because my folks at church and the community have been seeing me and hearing me talk about how important this is, and to be able to get out there and actually do something about it made it, it was a big difference, and I think it was a big impact, with the people, especially in our church, because they could see this isn't something that I just talked about, but really felt deeply enough about to actually now go out and do something about it. So it was a great opportunity for us.
What has been the biggest joy working in life ministry, or you can describe an event that you helped organize that was a success?
Well, in addition to all the things that I just mentioned, because those are all very fun, we also had the opportunity, I don't know if you guys have the same experience maybe down here, but in Wisconsin, typically the smaller towns are more conservative, and even the schools in the smaller towns. And so the pro-life group that I was joined up with, we had the opportunity to actually get into the schools. We convinced 3 of the local schools to let us come in and do talks with the 5th through the 8th graders once a month to talk about pregnancy, and we covered a whole range of things, but we were able to do basically sex education with these folks. Obviously we couldn't start quoting the Bible, but we could do it from a biblical perspective, and that was so much fun, to see the children's just the way that they really would. It seems strange to say this, but to see 5th, 6th, and 7th graders' faces light up when you would talk about these issues in a way that they'd never heard before. We were able to do that with them, and it was such a joy to be in those classrooms with those young children and to be able to educate them in good godly things, even if they didn't know they were good godly things. And that was such a great joy, and what a wonderful opportunity to be able to do in a public school. And not just at one, but at 3 local public schools, to be able to do this on a monthly basis for 4 straight years, to talk to these kids about life issues, but most, obviously we were dealing with pregnancy and things of that nature, but that was one of the best things that I got to do so far.
There's, I'm rolling through a bunch of stories in my head, but probably a couple of the things that have stood out most. The first one was when I was down in Cape Girardeau on Vicarage. They had moved the Pregnancy Resource Center from one building to another, and they were ready to dedicate that. And the group there, we had just 1 or 2 ladies from our congregation that were involved with that, and the rest of them were Roman Catholic. And by and large, in that community, nobody realized that Lutherans really cared about life issues. And so, of course, when I showed up in my collar, they asked me as the vicar to come do the dedication, which was great. So I showed up in my collar, and of course, Father, we're so glad you're here. Well, at the time, I had 4 kids, so hadn't had the 5th yet, so thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. But then I did get the opportunity to say what I did and who I was and why I was there. And I think even in the community, when I was in the parish, the opportunity to let folks know this is where we're at as Lutherans, and to let the community know that we are a place that you can come, and that really found a manifestation for me. I also coached football when I was in the parish still, and so I had a fairly decent relationship with a lot of teen boys, high school age boys that played football that I coached from junior high on, and many conversations about issues, life issues and decisions and choices came up because of that, and otherwise that wouldn't have happened. And the fact that I could coach football and yell and scream at them and make them do things they didn't want to do and make them a better football player, but yet still had the attitude I had towards life issues and towards the faith, really opened a lot of doors, and that's been a particular joy for me.
I think the greatest blessing that our small group has received thus far was just recently in June. The Lutheran Women's Missionary League had their convention, and they chose our group as one of 2 co-recipients for their in-gathering. Now, our group supports 3 pregnancy resource centers, one in Warsaw, one in Clinton, Missouri, and one in Sedalia, Missouri. So their in-gathering brought in all those baby supplies, baby shampoo, baby wipes, diapers, and and we had to take a trailer and haul all this stuff back, and we divided it up equally between the 3 resource centers, and everyone was so happy. Plus, we got cash and some gift cards, which they can go and buy things that they might need at those resource centers to help provide these things for these young people. And that's been the best blessing so far. I'm hoping that God will continue blessing us in that way, because these resource centers are very important.
Along with the fair and our local town as a celebration, we have a float. I guess one of the nicest or the things that I really enjoy is the people that will come up and encourage us and thank us for being there. And that was not there from the start. When we started in 2001, it was kind of a radical movement, a lot of it. And so we literally sat at the fair the first year or two, and even our church members would kind of avoid the booth. And because people just wasn't sure what was going on. So after they realized we were peaceful and, not being radical, and we were doing it in a very loving way, then people started to come to the booth and things become more successful at the booth. The little babies that you buy is a must, because the little girls will come up and pick them up. And let them pick them up, that's what they're for. So that was something that was, I thought it was really rewarding. The other thing that's kind of a turning event for us is the book of Genesis. To me, and I truly, truly believe it's the cornerstone of all this. Let me give you an example. I live, the church is 30 miles away from the Sternberg Museum in Hayes, Kansas. It's one of the biggest museums for dinosaurs. We have everybody from kindergarten through high school that science goes over there and tours that museum. So how do you tell your kids, gee, we're concerned about these babies, when if all we are is we evolve, what makes a difference who we kill, whether it's old, young, or in between, if it don't fit in with our program and we're just evolving. So how we got started in Genesis with Brian Young, we had him come in, and it's hard to understand, explain dinosaurs and all that stuff, unless you got a professional that comes in and explains to you how it all came about. And after we had him brought in, and actually did community stuff with Brian there, had it at the school, brought a lot of people into it, and realized that dinosaurs, were there with man, were there. And then you can go with Genesis and show that it was all made by God. The love of God loves us, loves babies. In return, we should love babies and love God. So that was, I think, the biggest turning point for us, is incorporating Genesis in our life work, and I think made us a lot more outreach to people.
I would say our biggest joy is really working the fair booth, and particularly using the fetal models, and really not seeing just small children pick up the fetal models and be impressed with them, but really the parents as well. We've had a couple of fathers-to-be come up and hold the fetal models at 12 weeks, the 16 and the 20 weeks in particular, and just be amazed, just standing there holding it and staring at it. Really just being amazed by it. And then having teenagers come up and tell us that they remember getting the 12-week fetal model from our booth when they were little children, and still having that little fetal model today. And then we actually, even this past year, had someone that we came up to the booth and we gave a bunch of information to, and then they went home and they took pictures of it all and shared it on Facebook. And we were able to find that and see that, wow, someone just was really that impressed with the information we gave them and shared with them that they wanted all their friends to see this as well. So, those have been some of the bigger joys.
And on the other hand, what challenges have you faced while working in the life arena, and how did you deal with these challenges?
I think the biggest challenge is not to go against what Pastor Kollbaum said about small towns being still isolated, is trying to fight that isolation model of that this can't happen here. Every couple of years or so, a couple of girls will high school girls will end up pregnant, and that this can happen here as well in our little town of 300, or the other town is 1,500, that this can happen here, and suicide can happen here, abortion can happen here, that these things aren't just big city problems, they're small town problems as well. And so just trying to keep continuously putting the information and the issues before everyone and just saying, this can happen here, we need to be prepared for it when it does happen.
I actually think it's a little easier today than it was when we started because of the radical movement at the time we started. But it will be tough to get started. You need to draw interest from the people. That's what the congregation, the pastor, has an important role here, getting it started. So, and you just need to keep encouraging people. Over the years, we actually kind of slowed up and then picked back up when Pastor Smith come along. You got to constantly encourage one another. So it's tough to get started because of the interest of the people. I mean, it's something that's slow to get them involved in. If you can get them, like, you know, certain people may get a baby that was saved from abortion, or get something in the community involved where it helped. That's the best way to start, for them to realize, hey, it can happen anywhere, and it does happen anywhere. We're counting 300, so if it's not there, down the road, maybe 10 miles, another school or something. So you just got to feel a lot of encouragement.
I think one of the greatest challenges we face is in numbers. Our numbers have been decreasing the last few years, and that's something we need to strive at, is trying to get more people involved in Lutherans for Life. The pastors in my circuit are, you could probably say they're involuntarily members of Lutherans for Life, because I include them on my email list. So I let them know what's happening with Lutherans for Life, whether they want to know about it or not. But yeah, numbers is the big challenge, and our small group is going to do the Reformation service dinner at the end of October. And what we have done, because our numbers are so small, we have recruited the help of the Lutheran Student Center in Warrensburg, Missouri. Now, this is a group that our circuit also helps support as a mission outreach from the Sedalia Circuit. So, because I'm part of the circuit, Lutherans for Life is in the Sedalia Circuit, you have to reach out and combine your forces, so to speak, if you have few numbers. My wife threw out the other day about, she sent an email about possibly having cookies as one of the desserts for our dinner coming up. I think we've got people signed up to, what are we up to, like 40 dozen cookies so far? But, you know, all it takes is getting the word out there, because people are more than willing to help. I read one where it said something about volunteerism. How come you don't volunteer? And I think the biggest answer was because nobody asked me. People want to do something, they don't know specifically what they want to do, but if you ask them, they're more than willing to help. So numbers is the challenge, and how I see overcoming that challenge is combining your forces and asking ladies' aid groups, men's clubs to help in your endeavors to get the life message out.
Well, I think just an amen to all three of you. Yeah, those are certainly probably the three things that I would identify as biggest challenges. And Pastor Schmidt, you certainly didn't rain on my parade, because that's what I often talk about is when we walk into a lot of rural and small town areas, you're walking into a mindset that's 40 or 50 years ago, when a lot of these things weren't as prevalent or as evident, at least, in rural and small town places. So it is a big challenge, and getting things started, getting going when you have low resources and not a lot going. So that does give us the opportunity, and I'm so excited to hear you talk about that. It's the partnership of the circuit there in the Northern Ozark Life Team, number one, but then reaching out to others and partnering with them as well, and what an opportunity that is to get more people involved and to go out and ask.
Well, we will have to share the free will offering for the meeting.
Well, yeah, I understand.
Give and take, right?
I did bake 200 cupcakes last night, so if you need a dessert, yeah, they have to be frosted yet, but that's, I'll do that later. So maybe we can keep going there, but the opportunity to do that. But I think this idea of the isolationism and thinking that these things can't happen. That was especially evident back, 15 years ago or so. There was, in Missouri specifically, there was some legislation on embryonic stem cell research and funding of that, and it was a real challenge to get folks to understand the truth about that and how that would really affect or could affect. Because that's a city thing, so that's happening in St. Louis or Kansas City. It's not going to affect us out here in rural America, and it's just not the case. It really is.
The one challenge that I've noticed the most, and I don't think this is just unique to rural and small town, although maybe it is, in a different way, I suppose, but a disconnect between how people feel about abortion and how they feel about euthanasia, right? Because you have a lot of people that say they're pro-life and they'll do anything and go out of their way to talk about abortion and the evils of abortion, and yet 2 minutes later are completely okay with, assisted suicide in whatever form that might be. And the reason I said earlier, that maybe it is unique to the small town is because, in a sense, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but these are people that they live around animals, right? And if the cow gets sick, well, you take care of it yourself, right? And maybe part of this is social, right? I mean, there is definitely social pressure for this, but I think also they really mean this when they talk about this. They really are coming at it with a heart for mercy, right? They actually think they're doing a good thing. They feel bad for this person, and they don't want them to suffer anymore. And so they think that it's a good Christian thing to do is to offer this as an out, right? And so there is this terrible disconnect in how they view the sanctity of human life. And again, I don't know that that's necessarily a result of their being brought up on the farm or not. But I do think that certainly is a struggle, and I see a lot of heads nodding out there, and so I think that's something that maybe you guys have all run into before. And so, I don't necessarily have the answer to this, but we do have to talk about, the sanctity of all human life. Because I think when people hear Lutherans for life and the sanctity of life, they immediately go to infants, right, and abortion. And they don't think about the other things. We had that wonderful presentation at lunch, about folks with disabilities. And many don't think about that either. But especially the elderly. Or not even just the elderly, but the suffering, the terminally ill. And all of these different categories that we might, bring into this discussion. But that's important to talk about too, because Christ has also redeemed those lives, and they're important to him too. And to talk about God as the author of life also means that he gets to be the one that makes the decision when that life ends. And we've certainly, in the last few years, taken that upon ourselves, and that is a challenge that we're going to have to face in a very hard way in the next few years as we go forward with this movement, because it's coming on like gangbusters all over the place.
For the sake of time, I'm actually going to open it up to the audience now because I want to get to your guys' questions before I keep on asking ones. So what do you guys have on your mind? Go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call you, and then if you could stand up and project well when you speak, that'd be great. Diane.
And I'm Federation President, so I'd like to know, I live in a big city, so what can I do to help a small town in rural America?
Send money.
No, you're supposed to be sending it to me, Kevin.
Right, yeah.
So what is there that I can do that could help you?
From my perspective, and what we try to help congregations recognize is help them understand that you're there and that you're there to help, and what resources you can give to them, to the congregation, so that there can be a working partnership. Part of our biggest issue is, and you mentioned Bethesda, the presentation, and that's why we have some Lutherans for Life, Bethesda organizations such as this come to our national conference, and we also do webinars and in our newsletters, as we are trying to connect folks to resource centers so that they have the opportunity, if they have the desire and the capacity to start a life team, or maybe don't have the capacity but the desire, and we can help them find the capacity But they need to be connected with the person who can help drive that and help them discover what potential there is in other partnerships so that they can bring that to bear. So that, I would say that's probably the biggest one, at least from my perspective, is helping those partnerships be able to thrive.
First observation, thank you very much for thinking of this as an area to explore for life issues. And we have appreciated in our seminary in Fort Wayne very much Pastor Kollbaum making this possible, making rural and small town ministry discussions possible for our students, because that's a very, very big thing. I just think it's brilliant to think that, of course, it has ramifications for life issues. I wouldn't have thought of that. Two questions, I'll ask them both together. The first question, when I think of young ladies facing a crisis pregnancy, one thing that always comes to mind is the potential feeling of isolation, feeling not supported, and all the things that we can do to overcome that, I think are so very precious. What about in a small town setting, as you described, where there still is more tight interaction, unlike a city where a young lady might think she's the only person living in New York, there are millions of people around, but still you're the only one, where you have that opportunity to capitalize on family connections and other small town connections. How can that be maximized in these situations? That's my first question for everyone. My second question is just kind of throw out there, how'd you know to get such articulate and insightful guests? I mean, every single person has such great insights.
I'll answer that first. Well, first of all, I didn't come up with this topic. Virginia Flood, who has organized the whole conference, you should thank her. She's worked so hard throughout this whole year. She was the one that had the idea in the first place, because we do hear this repeated, I don't know what we can do, that kind of thing. I feel like discouragement. As far as this lovely panel here, I, as mission ministry director, I make it a point to reach out to different life chapters and life teams throughout the country just to provide encouragement. And as I call people for different reasons, I kind of took notes as far as, I think they might be good. So anyway, these were the ones that I asked and also were available. So yeah, appreciate all you guys. Very articulate, as you said. Yeah, but I'll let you guys answer the question now.
Your first question is interesting because I find that in small towns, even though there is this close-knit family thing, that in some cases can actually cause isolation because there's nowhere for anybody to hide. In a big town, in a big school, kids can go and find their own little niche and they can go out in their own little groups. There's nowhere to disappear in a small town. And so when a young girl like that, finds herself in trouble or she gets pregnant, everybody knows. And there's nowhere to go. And this is part of maybe one of the downfalls about being in a small town that is historically conservative. They also still tend to look down and shame a young woman who does this. And so it causes her to feel even more isolated because she can't even go to grandma or her friends because they're now all looking down upon her. Whereas maybe in a big city, she could find a group of friends or some kind of group at school that would welcome her with no questions asked. Where in a small conservative town, that's not necessarily the case. And so it is an interesting challenge, in rural and small towns when it happens. So, we really have to foster then, and this goes with, the whole discussion that we've been having, fostering in our congregations the willingness to be open to this and welcoming, not to say that we're going to gloss over any sin that might have happened, right? But to share the love of Christ and His forgiveness and to know, okay, it's happened, now how can we move forward and, welcome you and show you the love of Jesus, take care of you, take care of the child in a loving way without shaming or ostracizing. Because I think, unfortunately, that maybe happens more in small towns than it does in big towns. And so, just as, again, at the great presentation at lunch, fostering this idea of sanctuary inside the congregation where we're willing to literally help and reach out with the love of Jesus, these people that are in trouble.
This is something I've been able to think about a lot over the years. We talk about babies are gifts from God, right? So why do we, when any woman gets pregnant, oh my God, what happened? Look, she got pregnant. We should never say that. A baby is a joy, a gift from God. We should rally around that woman and support that baby in a loving way. And so that everybody knows, including people that aren't Christians, that we support life and that it's a gift from God. What are you going to judge at that point in time? You can't say, well, why did you have this baby? That should have been done way before then. So there's nothing left to talk about except the joy of a baby. So this is something I've thought a lot about, is especially as Christians, and we noticed that at the booth when we first started, people are nervous about being judged. We made it very clear we were there not to judge you. We were there to help you. We're all miserable sinners. We all need a Savior. And so we were there to help you heal, or whatever you needed. A baby is a joy, a gift from God, and that's the way we should always act, because we're presenting the gospel by our actions.
To expound a little bit on what he just said, we need to change our vocabulary as to how we speak about these unborn children. Rather than calling them fetuses, we need to call them babies. Rather than saying that, oh, a woman is going to be a mother, if she's pregnant, she is a mother already. Just because the baby hasn't been born yet does not mean she's not a mother. She's a mother when that baby is conceived. And just little things like that. I sent an email, I think, to Pastor Salamick, seeing if we could change the name of these fetal models to baby models. You know, the 12-week, 16, 20-week. These are baby models. You know, we need to change how we speak about these unborn children. But also, Lutherans for Life is not just about unborn children. It's also conception to natural death. And a lot of people are misconceived. They don't believe that about Lutherans for Life, too. Something else I was going to mention we're getting ready to do, we're going to start holding, back to what Diane said, Lutherans for Life has so many resources available. They have free downloads, like bulletin inserts. They have Bible studies. They have the Life Date quarterly magazine. They have so much stuff that we can utilize. They have speakers who will come and speak at your congregation or at an event. All you have to do is call them up and invite them. We're going to have an event coming up in February on end-of-life issues. How to make end-of-life choices in a godly and Christian way. You know, and one of our pastors in our circuit requested that, so we're going to start doing that. And then hopefully, I need to get around as president and get to all those congregations and say, what do you want us to bring to your congregation to speak about? Because they're not going to come to us. We have to be, here's this word, aggressive. You know? Assertive. Assertive. Okay, well, I like aggressive. I was in the Army. What was that famous quote? Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Now, who said that? Some famous Navy general, I think. But anyway, yeah, we need to get out there and let these people know who Lutherans for Life is, what we have to offer, and start making our presence felt.
All right, we have time for one more question. I saw Karen's hand a little bit ago. So.
Well, I was wondering, we're talking about this issue kind of after the horses left the barn. And I'm wondering if in any confirmation classes we talk about the concept of purity and saving yourself for marriage, which you can find in the Song of Songs, certainly, and other places, I would hope. I thought about that a whole lot. But there's also the concept of the promise ring, that perhaps when young people, boys and girls, or young men and young women, when they're confirmed, that they wear a ring on the third finger of the left hand until they get married. The ring is a promise to mom and dad and their future spouse that they will not get involved in sex. You know, I'm all for babies and I love them, but you know, a baby in a family is a great thing. It's a little bit harder if there's only one person besides the baby in the family.
I'll let the parish pastor speak to confirmation, but when the horse left the barn, when Adam and Eve decided to lunch upon the wrong tree. So we've been playing catch up ever since. But I think you bring up a great point. Good catechesis is a great measure for not only life decisions at conception, but life decisions at end of life, and great catechesis of our young people as well as our older people who I find it kind of amazing. I had the opportunity to do. You shouldn't have ever handed me the mic. I had an opportunity to do a Q&A one time. I was a vacancy pastor. And Q&A, and some of the questions that some of the lifelong, staunch Lutheran LCMS folks in congregations that predate the synod, they were playing Stump the Pastor, and the stuff that they remembered from confirmation was way off base. And I know they had been well preached to and taught over the years, but over the years, you start to remember things differently, and the fact that we need to keep visiting the same thing. It's not just our junior confirmands, but it's all the way through.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. In addition to catechizing the youth, we have to catechize our adults. We have to teach them, and not just reteach them, but teach them to teach. Because, when I get kids, I get them for a couple of years. We just started a couple weeks ago, and I actually sat down with them, and we actually spelled out the years. So we have 27 class periods that we get together on Wednesdays. 27 hours. Twice. That's less than 60, right? You guys, most of you work more than that in 1 week. That's all I get, and so how do you parents expect me to teach them all that they need to know about the entire catechism, plus these really important issues, in 60 hours? You have to reinforce this at home. And I think many of them that maybe know that, but they feel inadequate to do so. And so we've got to catechize the adults to keep reinforcing these things with the children. That certainly is important. The other thing that I wanted to say in answer to the question, because I certainly do go over this with my confirmands, but it goes hand in hand with another very important discussion of the other big elephant in the room, the social issue that we're facing today. We really have to talk about what a great thing marriage is, and not just the sanctity of life, but marriage itself. Because the two things go hand in hand. They certainly do. And how we view human life is also, I think, going to affect how we view marriage. And we haven't done a real good job of holding marriage. And there's another one that I think we've gotten into the fight a little bit too late on, because we've let it go too far. And not just, if we're talking homosexuals, but even, just regular heterosexual marriage and divorce and all these issues that go with it. We have to talk about marriage like it's a good thing. And we have to live that in our lives, as Christian husbands and wives and fathers and mothers. We have to live as if we think marriage is a good thing. We have to teach that it's a good thing in every way, and I think that goes a long way in then talking, this discussion of purity and saving ourselves for marriage, because marriage is a good thing, and it's a delight in God's eyes. And that will affect, all of these other things as well. The two really do go hand in hand. And we've got to do, or begin to do a better job of talking about that issue as well. And just what a great thing marriage truly is, and why God instituted it, and why He loves it, and why we should save ourselves for marriage, other than just to say, well, because the Bible says so. Well, why does God say so? Why is it a good thing? And let's show them, not just teach them, but let's show them, as Christian men and women, what marriage is supposed to be like. And I think that'll go a long way.
In answer to your question, I think that's too late. The first 10 years are the most important time for that child to really understand all that. That should come from the parents. To give an example, we didn't have TV when I was a kid. We would go see my family, my dad's brothers and sisters on Sunday, because my dad didn't believe in work on Sunday. Uncle Chris had a television. We could watch Bonanza, but when Ed Sullivan come on, he'd shut it off because of the Beatles and the certain groups that were on there. He didn't want to watch. that looks like a Christian program today compared to what's on TV. That's how we become so far away from what's important. That needs to be done at the home by the parents, otherwise I don't think you're ever going to stop it. Look, modest dress, all that, look what we got today. So, I mean, my sister had to wear dresses most of her life because I thought that was the proper way to dress. So, it's got to come from the home. It's not going to come from, if the pastors don't have enough time with a few hours they got to suddenly turn his child around and make him be a young adult that should know right or wrong.
Yes.
I don't want to disagree with that, but just in response to this,
Karen.
this lovely lady here, our church has a pure freedom retreat for teenage young ladies, and it's been very valuable, I think, an experience for them, and they get together for a day and maybe an afternoon and a night and an evening, and it's a Christian, women from our church kind of mentor them, and they go over some of these things that might be difficult to do as a pastor, but they are able to instill some of these values that, and the importance of them that maybe can't be dealt with in confirmation class and so on. But that's been a very positive thing in our church.
But that's over and above confirmation, right? So you're going to extra effort to do this and not have to go to the pastor to try to incorporate it in confirmation class, right?
Right, it's.
Yes.
So you're happy with the status quo then, sir, and don't think there's any hope for going back to a more pure lifestyle?
Culture is extremely stressful on all of us. I mean, culture definitely has such a huge influence. I'm just saying it's tough when it don't start in the home. We're limited what we can do after that. Yes, we can have church programs, we can bring it up in confirmation, we can encourage modest dressing and different things in church, but the most valuable time is when that child's younger, and the parents' example that they show, that's what's going to influence that child, or have the biggest influence on that child. Everything else is catch-up, and then it's tough to do then. I feel anyway.
For the sake of time, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you guys have further questions for the panelists, feel free to chat afterward. But let's give them all a round of applause. So.